Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I'm Joe Barnhart. It's a show that is promoting, we hope, rational thinking and scholarship and science free of supernatural beliefs. And it's a call-in show.
All right. However, today, well, as every day, we have only one phone line. So if you can't get through, you can try and tweet us. Of course, I may not be watching the tweeter today. I'll be on since I'm on air. But it is at FFTVKNOX. While we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper, and we'll give you our email address later in the show.
Okay, in the Atheist Society of Knoxville, which helps sponsor this program, the host is meeting where?
We have frequent meetups at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria. In fact, there's one going on starting at 5:30 today. The Rationalists of East Tennessee have monthly regular programs throughout the month. On the first and third Sunday mornings, we meet at 10 o'clock in the Goins Cafeteria Annex at Pellissippi Technical Community College. We meet and greet at about 10 o'clock, and around 10:30 we start into more formal programs.
About 10:30 is a formal program, good, yeah.
All righty. Actually, there's no more public activities for RET this month. We don't have a book club this month. We normally have a book club on the second month, the second Sunday of the month, but this is an exception.
Sure.
The next book club is January, and the book is an interesting one. I brought it up here on my little pocket computer. It says, How Jesus Became God, the Exaltation of a Jewish Preacher from Galilee by Bart Ehrman. Dr. Ehrman teaches over in North Carolina somewhere.
Yeah, he's chairman
of
the philosophy at the university there in Chapel Hill. He spoke here at the University of Tennessee
a couple years ago.
Did a splendid job.
I saw him there. He was dynamite. He had that room packed, and I think they had like an overflow room packed where they piped the audio in.
He's very good. He's written a number of books. I've read several of them. They all, what he's good at, he's a very good scholar, and he writes clearly. He doesn't have a lot of jargon, so you can follow. You know, even if you're not a scholar in that field, you nevertheless can follow what he's saying.
My wife and I read the Gospel of Judas, and we very much enjoyed it. And I found that was the case, that he was writing to a general audience. He assumed you had no previous instruction in New Testament history or literacy. That would be hiteracy.
And he wrote Misquoting Jesus. That's another. But he's written several books. He comes from an evangelical background, and originally went, I think, to Wheaton College, which is a real stronghold in
it would be a fundamentalist kind of education?
Well, it's evangelical. It's not fundamentalist. It's evangelical, and holds to the inerrancy of the Bible and that sort of thing.
All right, I was going to say, I'm not sure I can always understand the distinction you may be making when you use those two words. That might be something to get into.
We'll try to get into that later,
Well, I thought the most, a very memorable part of that evening was when a member of the audience asked him, if he was a believer anymore, and he said no. And one of the things he explained that I think he found most that would undermine faith is the problem of evil. However, he used the more technical word for it, and that is
theodicy.
Theodicy.
And he has written a book on it called The Problem of God, and it's a very good book.
I'll confess, I don't know what the etymology of theodicy would mean.
Well, there's theos for God.
Okay, and so how does it mean the problem of evil then?
The problem of suffering. In other words, if you have a God who is in total control, then how do you explain? And if he's good.
And if he's good, there we go.
So much suffering in the world.
So if you assume it would be omnipotent, that's total power.
Omnipotence,
And benevolent, then that raises the question: whence evil?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the book of Job raises this question.
It sure doesn't seem to explain it satisfactorily, though.
Well, no, it doesn't. But you got to give him credit. He saw the problem, and he tried to work on it as best he could, He hadn't had the advantage of reading Darwin and everybody else. You got to understand, these people had not. These are people before Galileo and Copernicus.
Well, I'll take issue with that. So the Bible says that he who says there is no God is a fool. So we know that at the time whenever that phrase was written, there were non-believers because they were directly addressing the issue of non-belief. And I don't think I need to know the modern explanation for cosmology or the modern explanation for the origin of species to know that there's a problem when someone says God is all good, and yet I see children dying of diseases.
The theists saw that. That's no problem seeing the problem. Once you see the problem, how do you come up with a solution? That was their problem. Now you could have one solution was to have many gods.
Polytheism solves the problem.
They're in competition, and
because you now can have good gods and bad gods.
The collateral damage is tornadoes and all that. Yeah. And then one theory was with in parts of the Hebrew Bible, but mostly the New Testament, in the interbiblical period in particular, is the concept of Satan, and which God simply has this being, and instead of locking him up, well, you would any criminal, turns him loose and let him do all. He's the henchman for God, or hitman, and that doesn't solve it.
Well, it's funny you say hitman for God, because that implies that God has given him a commission to do
you
that.
have in 1 Samuel, I have to look up the exact chapters now.
I didn't bring my Bible with me, I'm sorry.
You have God pretty much tempting David to take a census of the people, and that was considered to be evil in that time. I won't go into as to why. And so as punishment,
David was supposed to choose amongst three punishments.
Yeah, and one of the punishments, I think 70,000 Israelites get slaughtered. It's a pretty grim story. In Chronicles, it's changed from God tempts him to Satan does. The adversary. Now, and I think that's the reason is that the believers in those days saw a problem in saying God deliberately tempted him and then punished him for doing it, and that's just evil.
Now, when I read the Bible, I didn't have anyone to ask about that, and so I read it as I recall, it was Chronicles was the latter of the two,
exactly.
and I'll confess, I didn't remember when I read that Satan tempted David or caused David to take the census. I read it and said, he's taking a census again? Didn't he learn from the mistake of the first time? I assumed that there were two censuses taken.
No, it's just a revising of the story. And in other words, in the revised version, the guy realizes the first version has a big problem, and it's a theodicy problem.
Yeah.
God is supposed to be in control, and yet all of this evil. And why would he tempt David and then punish him for doing it in the
Yes, yes.
And of course the problem still is why you keep alive a Satan to do the dirty work.
Yeah.
I mean, that's irresponsible too. But anyhow,
all right, well, we've come a little off target. Often we go to a break and do In the News here after talking about our organizations. And I guess In the News is you visited, maybe it's not wide news, we're going to make it news here. You went up and visited southeastern Kentucky and spoke before some students there.
Yeah,
with, I guess there was someone representing creationist ideas?
Yeah, there was
what happened there?
Well, it was a chaplain had invited us up there, a very interesting chaplain, very open-minded fella, who wanted to have various viewpoints.
And where was there, Joe? Where was there?
Oh, that's Pikeville.
Pikeville?
University of Pikeville. Yeah.
University of Pikeville.
Yeah,
so this
really
is
interesting place.
A state institution.
Yeah,
And the chaplain invited you up.
Yeah, and to talk to the students, big auditorium there, and the chaplain then with his mic asked questions for this
of you and who was the other person on stage?
He was in biology, some branch of biology. I've forgotten what it is.
Okay.
Not organic chemistry. I've forgotten which one. One branch.
Evolutionary biology?
Well, he should have known it anyhow. But anyhow, But he was taking the view that the Earth is, you know, not very long. You know,
a young Earth view.
A young Earth view, yeah.
Okay.
And also he's taking a very conservative view of the infallible view of Scripture. We're going to get into this later on.
Okay.
But anyhow, what interested me is the students had a lot of very interesting questions, and you know, you had good dialogue.
Can you remember some of the questions that the students asked?
One of the questions was, the question for me is, why, well, one of the big questions always comes in, how can a person who thinks there might not or is not a deity, how can he have morality? You know, and then, you know, this question comes up a lot. And then one question is, how does something like love and things like that get developed? And of course, one of the questions for the scientists had to do with if you hold to God creating a world and this, how do you? It got into the problem of evil, and of course the problem of if you get into the Bible, there's a lot of destruction going on. And how would you? We've dealt with this on this program, but drowning all those people.
Oh, but of course we may have new viewers tonight, Joe. We can't assume that all of our viewers have heard what we have to say on the subject.
Well, we brought up in the program is saying if. So I argued in this part of the program, what is an atheist? Well, there are all kinds of atheists, all kinds.
Okay.
One kind is one that claims there's a creator, but the creator is so evil that I call this guy who holds that an atheist.
Okay.
In other words, the reason is this. If you're going to have a God, he's got to be moral. He's got to be a moral exemplar at the very least. And if you don't, then you've got something like a cosmic Nazi. So that was the position I took, that this guy, who was a very intelligent guy.
So you're going to say that you assume that if it's called God, it needs to be good. That if it's not,
that's what the word God is supposed to mean. Yeah. That was the whole function of the. And if it's not, then the guy's just got some creative energy that happens to be conscious, and he does just pretty much what nature does. But on this view, more than nature, he also does a lot of evil and harm, and plus the doctrine of hell. And I called him either criminally insane or just a sociopath. The projection of God like that is more like a sociopath, and it's not a God. It's just a projection of the evil part of human beings.
All right, I follow you. I don't use the word that way. I would tend to be uncomfortable with that. I would want to say that, to me, when someone says God, I'm assuming that that means something supernatural outside the regular laws of nature, which we normally think of as having no exception.
Well, that's a traditional view. But you also have to recognize what I'm talking about is traditionally. It has to be good. And I was focusing on that. And so if it doesn't measure up there, then it's not God.
And in fact, I would say that once we see what the laws of nature tell us about the universe, that what's left over that we maybe don't know, that we can honestly say we don't know why there is a conservation of energy. There is no theory that I know of that says, you know, explains why there is a conservation of energy. But that whatever it is that might, quote, explain why there's a conservation of energy, there's no indication that that interacts with human beings, and it has a sense of what we would call right and wrong. And I would say it doesn't deserve to be called God, therefore.
That's fine. And the word atheism is just a word, theism is what that means. So that's atheism. So
then you said, someone asked, how does love develop? How did you respond to that?
Well, it's pretty simple. We define love, I think most people would agree, is caring about the happiness and security and pleasure and the education and well-being of others.
Okay. But if the question was how does it develop, you still haven't addressed the developmental issue of it.
Sure. It develops because we are born genetically as social creatures.
All right.
And we therefore interact with each other, and we then either interact in terms of violence, stealing, raping, clobbering each other, or we learn to cooperate and lovingly.
All right.
So that's a social development. And it's in animals too.
That's where I was going with this.
Yeah.
So of course we interact with our fellow human beings, you know, as individuals. You know, we aren't strong enough and smart enough to build our own vehicles, for instance. You know, I buy one that experts have made, and in fact they make systems to make cars. And although I've planted a few plants and occasionally harvested the fruits of a garden, if I was left to entirely depend on that, I'm sure I'd starve to death in the first season. I just don't think I could pull it off.
Okay, you put yourself...
So therefore, I'm dependent on others. Now, that dependency means that there's a kind of a reciprocal thing that I must know that if I don't do business with them honestly, so to speak, they won't do business with me, and I'll starve.
Sure.
I'm a little more proactive than that. I enjoy conversation. I see we got a light blinking, Joe. Let's take the call.
Go ahead.
Hello, caller. Thank you for calling Freethought TV. Can we get a name or a nickname, please?
Caller is just fine.
Caller, thank you for calling us today.
Yeah, Joe there, he inspired a question. He was talking about God, if he's not good, as being I believe he used the term psychopath or something along those lines. But I was wanting his opinion on this question. Would someone who worships such a psychopathic, supernatural creature, would it be fair to call these people demon worshipers? I mean, if you are worshiping some creature that will do such evil and demonic things?
Tell you what I want to do. I want to make a clear distinction from the view and people. Are you with me?
Yeah, I just know that sometimes
not everybody
people call atheists demon worshipers. You know, why do you worship demons? And I'm just trying to get that term a little bit more defined. But go ahead.
Well, first of all, I don't think there are demons, so I'm not sure what your question is.
Caller, restate your question.
You could worship something without it actually existing.
Exactly.
But I was just wondering, would demon worshiping be an appropriate or fair label, if you will, for those people that worship some creature that is so obviously, I believe you used the term psychopathic.
Okay, let me put it this way. You can't do a good job in trying to refute anybody's view until you present their view accurately. And many of these people hold that there are also loving aspects to what they call God. Now, what I'm arguing is their God is a projection of some of the best part of us and some of the worst part of us. Are you following?
Yeah, I'm following.
And it's not demonology. In other words, it's all projection of human values and human evil projected onto a being that they call God.
Okay. So when someone calls an atheist a demon worshiper, then maybe we should just refer to your answer just then, which is people are all different and something like that.
Well, yeah, and first of all, if you're an atheist, you don't believe in demons anyhow, so you're not worshiping demons.
Well, that's an even more succinct answer. Well, thank you for answering that.
Before you go, caller.
Huh?
Before you go, I've written a question here.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
I'm going to ask both you and Joe the following question, because as you were discussing it, it's not clear to me what you may mean by this. So, caller, what do you mean by worship?
Worship is usually somebody that says, worship is usually a person. Well, in some theist circles, for most theists, worship is when you're falling down on your knees and you're sweating as you're praying that you not get killed, or that you not be killed by this deity, or that maybe he'll allow you to have food so you won't die there. But that's usually what worship is. You know, how you're really gray.
Well, that's why I thought I'd ask the question, because if that's what caller thinks. So you've written fall on knees and pray.
Well, pray.
And sweat.
Well, listen, if I'm praying to somebody that's a psychopathic deity, I guess I would sweat.
Oh, okay, now that's...
so, Joe, how would you define this worship?
See, I don't like misrepresenting people I don't agree with.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? Now, most people I know who worship don't fall on their knees. Okay?
Fall might be I've seen these little knee cushions in churches.
I've been in churches too where they got the little benches you ritually get on your knees.
That comes out of what's called the high church tradition. That's usually Catholic and Episcopal, sometimes Lutheran, mostly Catholic and Episcopal church.
Well, I could not. I mean, we didn't have to say knees. We could say stick your bottoms up in the air, because I think I've seen that in some churches too.
Well,
where they get down so low that...
It's very much like using Joseph Stalin as a model of atheism. How does that sound to you?
That sounds probably fair, in that he was an atheist and he...
But he's not a model that represents all atheists adequately now, caller.
Yeah.
And there's the issue, is that if you take a specific example and assert that that must be true of all of them, you've made an error.
Yeah, exactly. It's inaccurate. In other words, what we're saying to you, if you're going to talk about Christians, don't make caricatures and misrepresent. First of all, you obviously don't know...
Actually, I said theist. I don't believe I said Christian this time.
Okay. I don't think callers use the word Christian.
Then I think you'd be even more inaccurate. Because there are Jews who are theists.
Now, Joe, I want to pin you down. What is worship? I don't think you've answered the question straight on.
Okay, no, I haven't. You could do this, but I think this would be too easy. You could say worth-ship. In other words, you just recognize the worth of something. But but I keep insisting the meaning of a word is the way people use it. And that's what the dictionary is about, really. And usually it means when you worship someone, you recognize their worth and their value. They're an ideal. And usually you have hymns or praise to celebrate this worth and value.
That's interesting. So you talked about recognizing this worth or value, and I was about to raise the objection that to me, the word worship is far more an active verb. It implies not merely a mental state, but it implies actions visible in the world, let's say. So I'm a little bit more with caller on that.
Give me an example of one.
Well, the term that I often hear is, said in a positive manner, he's a God-fearing man. In other words, he fears, apparently, God. Didn't say Christians.
Now, I thought, so I was going with worship involving, ritual behavior. That to me is the connotation in there.
Okay.
Where now, and you, Joe, though, you felt that it was, in a sense, almost a mental state.
Well,
saying,
I'm having to agree with you on one major point, however.
Okay.
Is that usually with people who are worship, I'm trying to get in the more common denominator, is there is singing, that's an activity.
Yep.
And there's usually praying. And those are the two basic things, singing and praying. And the singing is celebration, and the praying is either meditation or trying to make a relationship with the deity.
All right. It's interesting you mentioned singing here. I want to bring up something that perhaps will be interesting to caller as well. If you have read Thomas Paine's Age of Reason, as I have, caller, are you familiar with Thomas Paine?
Oh, intimately.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
So Thomas Paine makes an assertion that when the Bible uses the word prophecy, they actually are referring to like singing and making music.
I've heard that.
That to prophesize meant to go around sort of singing, and I was just amazed when I read that in Age of Reason.
Yeah.
And I wonder if modern scholarship agrees with Thomas Paine on that. And Joe, you're my expert here.
Well, you got two versions here. One is predictions.
Okay.
And then another version is the prophets are really proclaiming justice.
Okay.
You find this in Amos and Hosea, justice and mercy. In other words, they are social critics.
Okay.
And that's why some of them are in the hot water with the kings.
Uh-huh.
And so, in that sense, and then some make predictions if such and such things aren't changed, then you're going to have dire consequences or good consequences.
So, caller, am I remembering correctly? Did Thomas Paine imply they were singing and musical instruments were involved?
I've heard that prophesizing idea before, where there'd be groups of people wandering around and they'd be singing and all, and that would be one term of what prophecy was. But at the same time, you have in the Old Testament where people are making predictions for the future, and I think that's what we've come to recognize as prophecy.
Thomas Paine has a good point.
I believe I'm just hanging on here listening to you, and I hate taking up so much time when there's probably dozens of other people that prefer to call in. But I did have one more question for Forrest.
All right. Let's both be quick then.
Okay, here's the question. Just recently, there was this thing in quantum physics where these photons change their spin instantly, even though they're not connected to each other. As a physicist, I'm sure you're aware of all that.
Go.
Okay, you're talking about something that in the literature they say they talk about quantum entanglement.
Right.
And I've heard assertions that they create this state where two photons are entangled, and then they will make a measurement of one which forces the other one to become into a known state, and that transition to a known state happens at a distance, and that this transition happens, so to speak, faster than the speed of light.
Right, instantaneously, and at the last experiment it was 15 miles apart. Now my question is...
and let me explain. If you've read something that is as specific as saying 15 miles apart, you're more up to date than I.
Well, that was yesterday. It was the latest experiment. It was just further distance. Same results, but a further distance.
What's more is the physicist in me must quibble and say there's no such thing as instantaneous. What you could say is our measurements have a resolution of, let's say, 15 picoseconds or something, and it was less than that.
I would agree with you there. I thought I was taken aback by
instantaneous.
Instantaneous too, but that's what they said, so I was going with it. But what I'm asking you is does that not seem to you to border on the supernatural? As an atheist, I would think that no.
Let me tell you what supernatural means. Is that there is a conscious being who foreknows and plans and brings about things eons ahead of time. Plans way ahead. And what we're saying as a non-supernaturalist is the universe was not planned. It's very complicated, and what you're pointing out is part of the complications. But
well, I was curious about that. It just seems so out of the realm of everything that we've had so far.
Well,
all right, caller. So I can't give you a quick answer, but what I can tell you is that the formulation of quantum electrodynamics (QED) assumes that in order to predict true results, you have to consider all possible paths that let's say an object undergoing some change in the natural world might take, including those that are faster than the speed of light, and you sum them all up, and there's a probability assigned to all of them, and the net result is the result of the summation of all those probabilities. I'm guessing that wasn't a very satisfying answer, but
no, I was just wondering if I should start believing in ghosts or something.
No.
Okay, good.
So there is a marvelous book by Richard Feynman, who is one of the people who received the Nobel Prize for quantum electrodynamics, called The Nature of Physical Law, I believe. I have it, and I could bring it down to Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria if you care to meet us there sometime, and assuming I remember to bring it in advance. And you can read it and be dazzled by Richard Feynman as I am. All right?
Oh, okay. Well, let me get off here. I'm sure there's other people wanting to call in, and I'm ashamed for staying on so long.
Well, thank you for calling and asking such good questions. And I believe I recognize your voice, and so I can say, have you watched us before?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I have.
All right. Thanks for calling.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I can't remember whether it was Niels Bohr or one of those physicists back then. To be is to be related.
To be is to be related. I'm not. I don't recognize it.
I can't recall. I was thinking Niels Bohr, but I can't be sure. But anyhow, I think what he's saying is that well, we're going to have a caller.
We have another call.
Yeah.
Well,
what he's trying to say is, even the units like the subatomic particles, the relationships are as real as the particles.
All righty, go ahead.
Go. We got a caller. Go ahead.
Yes, hello. I was just calling because...
and can you give us a name or a nickname, please?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, my name is Greg.
Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to call in and ask you for... I had a definition of supernatural.
Go ahead, yeah.
My understanding is that it's just something above and beyond the natural. Something that's not natural or not subject to the laws of physics.
Well, Greg, let's be careful about the use of the word super. What does super mean in this context? Super carries both connotations and denotations, and that's what I'm getting at here, that we are clear we understand. What would that mean? What would supernatural? You used the word above. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, I would say that super in this context would mean above.
Okay, I thought you were saying above and has no natural at all, no relation to the natural. I may have misunderstood you, but anyhow,
yeah, I think that's fair. I would say beyond nature.
Okay, most supernaturalists that I know about hold to what I call interactionism. They believe there's a natural world and that scientists study and you and I can interact with, and then there are supernatural phenomena that interact with the natural world. And what we're trying to say is we don't see any evidence for the supernatural that they're talking about in the way we're defining it. We think the natural world is a natural world, and that's it.
Greg,
okay.
I've written the following here as Joe was talking, and I was trying to think about what you said. That using the word above with super implies a control of the natural world, and probably this is a one-way. The natural world doesn't control backwards. Is that kind of the way you use it? Do you think it means that?
Well, I'm just kind of tell you my true colors here. I don't believe in the supernatural either. So I'm just calling in to say that the supernatural is not always just a conscious being who decides what's going to happen in the future. And sometimes it can just mean something above nature.
Oh, okay, good.
I've heard a definition that would work like this, that the supernatural would be that which can cause at least a temporary suspension of what we otherwise think of as the rules of nature, and that the suspension does not follow any predictable rule of its own. Otherwise, we would merely we would extend the rules of nature to include it.
Well, we were going to talk about theism and atheism.
Well, let me ask, Greg, did that help you? Do you see where that definition is, maybe it has some utility, at least in some conversations?
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. I'm just kind of confused because last week, Joe, he said that he was an interactionist.
Go ahead.
And it wasn't really clear to me. I mean, if you're an interactionist, then I was confused to thinking that maybe you did hold the view that there were supernatural.
Okay, let me.
Well, maybe not supernatural, but yeah, go ahead.
All I was saying, in the context of last week, all I was trying to say is, I don't go to the dentist. I have pain. I don't think I can reduce pain to just brain states. I think pain has a reality of its own, Now, I don't have pain without my brain states in my other parts of my body, but I don't reduce my brain states to just units of the brain state.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Are you a materialist?
I'm glad
Like,
you brought
believe
that
that-
up. No, I'm an interactionist.
Okay, so there are things that exist that have real existence
Okay.
that are not made up of atoms or that are not matter and energy.
I've got to be
It's
very
something else.
specific. I gave you an example of pain, okay, and the feeling of pleasure is more than without the brain states. I wouldn't have the feeling of pleasure, but I don't reduce my states, my psychological states, to simply physiological states. I'm an interactionist. That's what interaction means. That's non-supernatural. Part of nature. Pain is part of nature.
Okay.
So Joe, as you're describing this, I can't help but think I need to introduce a new term to argue about. Maybe it'll clarify it or muddle it, and that is dualist. So a dualist says that there is a mind independent of the brain. Am I using that word in a common way? I think
that's why I don't use the word dualism.
But when you say interaction, that just begs the question of what's interacting with what, and then I've at least got two.
Okay.
And therefore dual.
Okay. Let me show you what I mean.
All right.
I'm what's called an emergent evolutionist.
An emergent evolutionist.
Yeah.
Go on.
And that things like pain emerge as part of the evolutionary process. And they're functional.
But they would only exist when you've got a biological substrate for that to work on.
I think you're right.
Okay. So then I'm not sure what's interacting with the biological substrate, because to say interaction implies that it's got a separate existence.
Okay, I go to, it's separate in the sense it's distinct. I can distinguish.
Couldn't it merely be a distinct configuration?
Well, here's where you and I would differ.
All right.
I go to the dentist because I feel the pain. I don't go to the dentist and say, look and see if I'm having any pain. The pain. What I'm saying.
But you have physiological states
that make the pain
that, in principle, are observable as well. In principle, they're observable by the outside world.
Exactly.
We believe they would be.
Yeah, I got you. You can use instruments at least.
So I have a question. Does the mathematical or arithmetic concept of addition exist independent of matter?
Well, that's a good question. Exist where?
Well, that's why I phrase it that way, because then they're going to say, well, where would it exist except in matter?
Okay, put it this way. That'd be a good example of what I'm talking about. The mathematics is relationships.
Well, so addition. I'm trying to be specific because that might help us be. It might help us find where our vocabulary and our common understanding might have holes in it. So, once again, does addition exist without matter?
Well, you wouldn't have anything to add.
But I'm in agreement with you. I'm trying to find a way to contradict that.
Well,
without either matter to make thinking beings to think of addition, or without matter to have objects where we can say, I've got 3 here, I've got 2 here, I push them together, I count it again, I got 5.
Okay, if you're using the word exist, and I think you are, it's got to be locatable in a space and a time. Then I would have to say, no, it doesn't exist in space and time.
So addition doesn't exist in space and time. Yet for us to have that concept, we do it with our brains, which does exist in space and time.
And the concept.
I've talked myself into a corner. I'm not sure where I was going with it now.
Well, that's because we're on one of the most difficult problems that human beings ever came up with.
Which is?
It's the brain-mind interaction theory.
Yeah.
It is very complicated. If you could solve that, we could probably solve the theism problem.
It's funny you say that it's complicated. I don't think it's complicated at all. I think it's nonsense to think that our mind could exist without the brain. I'm
well,
real
that's why I'm
confident
in
on that.
agreement with you.
Yeah, agreement, you said.
Well, sure, I'm an interactionist.
All right. And now I'm begging the question again: what's interacting with
I'm not a
mine?
dualist.
Yeah, all right.
Another,
Greg, have we danced around your problem enough?
He probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
Oh, you're still awake.
Sure have. And well, I'll just ask you this, and then I'll get off the line. You said that numbers don't really exist
in space
because there's no space and time where they are able to be.
You don't locate them in space.
I think I said without matter existing, I don't think we could. Once we've got matter, I think all those things become possible.
It wouldn't matter.
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
That's a different usage of the word matter, Jim.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to ask about consciousness because, as far as I know, consciousness isn't spatially, well, maybe it is spatially located, but I don't know where my consciousness rests in space and time. And so I was wondering if you could deal with that, and I'll go ahead and get off here. Thanks for the conversation.
Well, stay with us in case we need to ask for clarification.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, most of us agree. It's certainly temporal. There was a time when I did not have consciousness, so at least it's temporal.
It's it's bounded at least by something around our birth or a couple of years after.
Yeah. And
I would agree with that.
And I'm not conscious over in China.
Yep. So it's kind of bounded around here. I've got Joe bounded.
Now where's it going to be located? My consciousness. Pinpointed.
Well, I think it's distributed. I don't think it exists in one particular point in the brain.
And that's not interactionism, is it?
I'm not sure I know what you mean by that.
Well,
so I can't answer yes or
parts,
no.
Parts in these, we like to call them the points of the brain. Let's use that. And that's another piece of myth we could use. And they are interacting with each other. But the interaction is as real as the points, is what I'm arguing.
I'll go with that.
Okay.
Greg, we had a great program at the Rationalists of East Tennessee once. One of our members presented some excerpts from Daniel Dennett's book. And I could have said the title a moment ago, but it was about the emergence of consciousness. And
is it consciousness
evolves,
explained, or consciousness emerges, or
it might be consciousness evolves.
Yeah.
I
remember the title either.
I thought I could have said it with confidence, and now that I've said that, I'm not confident. But Dennett talked about how there are activities going on in the brain that we may not be conscious of, but they're competing, so to speak, for consciousness, and that seemed to offer some insight into, I think, what it is like to experience consciousness myself. That I may be doing things, and I'm getting hungry. And finally, it forces itself to the top, and I realize, it's been gnawing on me for a while, and that I have been sufficiently focused on something else that I didn't give it full attention. So it was an interesting program, and it's made me want to read that book. And I would think that the question you asked might at least get some insight on that.
You're not talking about unconscious thoughts, are you?
Yeah.
Well, the whole point in that book, I think, is that there are things going on in our brain that are not, let's say, directly conscious, but that are essential to us surviving and doing the things we do as a human being. So if I walked into this room earlier, but I didn't have to pay attention to the exact placement of my feet. I delegated that to a part of my brain that once upon a time had to have full consciousness to do it, but mastered it, and now has said, okay, I'll take on that job. I'll be your walking brain, and that leaves the central consciousness more free to deal with the immediate things of today and the here and now.
So you can carry on a conversation in the car and still drive.
Yeah, and so I don't think there's really just one Forrest Lee Erickson. I think there's actually this sort of systems, and there's a system of me that does the walk-in. There's another system that does the drive-in, because it's a different activity. And there's a system of me that's watching out for peripheral traffic and so on. Did I successfully?
I think you might be on something. Well, if
all right, Greg, the phone.
They'll continue to move around quite a bit.
Yeah, the phone got really choppy there. Why don't we say thanks for calling?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
And if you're local, are you local?
I'm in Nashville.
Okay.
Well, that's good.
Well, I was going to say, if you're local, please come and visit us. Nashville's not too far. You could make a drive out here sometime. Barley's Tap Room and
I might be able to do
Pizzeria.
that.
Tuesday night, look for the silver-covered copy of The God Delusion sitting on the table. Or the Rationalist programs on Sunday morning, first and third Sunday. We do book club Sunday afternoon. Actually, it's 2 o'clock these days.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah,
Thanks.
well, I'm glad we cleared that up a little bit because, I was a little worried when Joe was talking about being an interactionist. I just wanted clarification. I think that helps me a little bit. I'm still a little bit confused, but at least we were able to revisit that a little bit.
I'm with you. I'm going to grill him on this and maybe try and force him to use a different vocabulary. I don't know if I'll win, though. He's pretty good at what he does.
That is true. So.
All right.
Well, you guys take care. Have a good rest of the day.
Happy holidays, Greg.
Yeah, you too.
I like your notion of almost we have multiple persons.
Yeah, oops, I pushed the wrong button.
And we use the word integrity to say that the society we live in pressures us to integrate. That's what, so that your yes is yes and your no. In other words, you can't pass it off to another one of your.
Yeah.
And the word integrity means an integrated self that keeps up.
Oh, that's an interesting conflation of words. I don't normally use them that way. I'm going to ask, are we ready to do the mid-program commercial breaks? And if you can push the buttons and make that happen, that'll give Joe and I a chance to rest our voices.
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Looks like we're back. Well, you've been watching Freethought Forum. We got about 10 minutes left, so if you think you might want to call, it's time to do so now. By the time we get to 2 minutes left, we won't take any more calls because we'll be needing to wrap up.
Yeah.
Joe and I've been quizzing Joe on his experience up at the University of Pikeville in Kentucky, where
It was a great time.
where you spoke on behalf of non-belief. Joe, the LED is blinking again.
We got another caller. Okay, we got a caller. Go ahead, please.
Give us a name or a nickname, caller.
Call me M&M. How about that?
Okay.
M and M. Does that mean you're sweet or that you're peanut filled?
Go ahead. Let's hear
That's my initials. How about that?
Okay.
All right, great.
My name is Mike.
Okay, Mike.
I've seen this program a few times, and I got a sort of a comment question.
Sure.
You guys look to be about my age. I'm in my mid-50s.
55, mid-50s.
Thanks for the compliment.
Well,
go ahead.
So you remember what a '73 Chevy Caprice looked like, right?
I'm from Minnesota. They look like rust buckets.
Well, back in the day, they were pretty good old cars, but a friend of mine wanted me to replace the flywheel on his vehicle one time for him, and I gave him a price and a date.
All right.
And he wanted me to hurry up and do it, so he come by and said, "Hey, I'll pay you like double."
All right.
And, I wasn't quite prepared to do that, but I had a few tools in my old truck, and those cars back in those days had those little bumper jacks that you just put in a little slot in the bumper, jack them up.
I missed your question. What was it?
He's going to lift up a Caprice with a bumper jack, which is a really dangerous thing to do. Go on.
Correct. I did that in the front and the rear on one side.
Oh, man, that's really dangerous. Go on.
All right. I get up under the car. I remove
the bell housing cover.
Pull the transmission back. Anyway, I'm jerking on the drive shaft.
You knocked the jack loose, didn't you?
I was raised as a Christian, believing in Jesus Christ and God and such as that. But while I was jerking on this drive shaft to get it out of that transmission, a voice came in my head. My friend and his son were standing directly in front of the vehicle. A voice came in my head, and I stopped jerking on the drive shaft for just a few seconds there, moments, and I proceeded to jerk again a few times, and that car made like a little flinching movement. And when it made that flinching movement, I come up from under the car, and those guys, the car hit the ground, those guys looking under the car, and I'm laying off to the side, and I said, "Are y'all looking for me?" And they said, "Yeah, well, how'd you get up in that car?" And I said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, I said, Jesus told me to get out from under the car, and I didn't heed the word, but I heeded the movement. And the last comment, the guy on the right in the purple-looking shirt there made something about a third part of our brain. Yeah, you're the one. Yeah. And my understanding about us as humans, we use like half our brain anyhow, and some of us I think a lot less, but I just wonder what your thoughts of how
this voice.
I've never heard before, never heard since, and
yeah, there's a book on this.
How do you think it happened? Pardon?
There's a book on this. A lot of people hear voices now and then. The origin of consciousness and the something of the bicameral mind.
The breakdown of the bicameral mind.
That's it.
Once again, RET did a book club review on that. I didn't attend that one, so I'm not an expert.
Well,
but it's a memorable title.
Yeah, I used it in a course once years ago. I think it's Julian Jaynes, J-A-Y-N-E-S, The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. That's the name of it. And he gives a number of cases of people who hear voices, including voices to kill themselves. And but he does not contend any of them are supernatural. He just says the brain is crisis-oriented.
Crisis-oriented,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Crisis, yeah. And that, and of course, mine is similar. I never, as far as I know, I never sleep without vivid dreams constantly. If I wake up, I come up with another dream. If I wake up, and at my age, you wake up about 3 times. And what I'm saying is, I hear voices all the time. They're in my dreams. A lot of people are awake.
Yeah.
And hear voices.
Awake.
Yeah.
I was conscious. I was sober.
Yeah.
And
I can believe that.
It like gave me a warning to get out from the car, and and I didn't heed the voice. I mean, I don't think I'm actually crazy or something like that. But it sort of saved my life by that car would have. They were very low on the ground. It probably would have squashed me. If not killed me, it probably would have hurt me pretty bad physically.
You'd have been pinned under there very uncomfortably at the very best scenario.
No doubt.
So you basically told yourself to get the heck out. We all do that in one way or another.
So, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I just wanted to kind of like put that toward y'all and see what y'all might have said about that.
My wife is a musician, and she, early in the morning, she sees musical scores on the ceiling. These are hallucinations. And I wish I had them.
I've met his wife, Mary Ann. She's described this before, that she often dreams and then sees musical scores.
Yeah, just right there on the ceiling, across the ceiling.
So Mike, you do, if you stop and think, you can, maybe remember your parents' voice, your siblings' voice, and you can certainly remember the voice of people you've heard recently, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
And when we remember someone else's voice, in a sense, we're synthesizing that,
That's a good way to put
that sensory experience of what it was like to hear them in person, right?
You got a you got a good creative brain. You're lucky.
Now, I know, I've never had a waking experience where I've heard like a voice, the thing that Mike described, but I know that when I've dreamed, I've occasionally dreamed of invented persons where, you know, upon waking, I'll think that was not a person whose voice or appearance I can remember ever interacting with, and I don't think it was merely something that I'd forgotten. I think I invented a person. Have you ever dreamt of something that might be a pure invention, Mike?
Sometimes I feel like I have sort of a sixth sense about things, because certain things can happen, or I can feel that certain things are going to happen. And if I go against that feeling, it seems like something bad happens. But if I go with that feeling, I seem to avoid certain situations that would be on the bad side.
So I think
that's happened several times in my life.
So I think what we can say is that our brain, we are not really just one thing. Our brain is a collection of things that we learn how to do. And the example I gave earlier is that we learned how to walk when we were young, and a part of our brain has just sort of taken that over, and we don't have to give it direct supervision all the time. When it's real important, we can still give it direct supervision and step very carefully around obstacles and not step on the dog's tail or something like that. So I think that when you're underneath your vehicle and you were rocking it around, part of your brain might have been saying, hey, wait a minute, I've been advised not to jack up vehicles and, you know, not have jack stands under them. And it was making you uncomfortable, and it may have then synthesized a voice, or was trying to synthesize a voice.
Okay.
It's a plausible kind of way for the brain to work. As I say, I know I've, in some dreams, synthesized people and voices. Mike, are you local? Did we already ask that?
Now I'm in Knoxville, yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And, of course, we invite you to come down to Barley's after the show and speak with us. I'm fond of saying I can lie with authority on almost any subject except sports trivia. And there are other brilliant minds that you'll find there at Barley's. And if you come to the Rationalists of East Tennessee, you can meet some of the same people and some other people with brilliant minds. And we can have these kinds of conversations.
Well, thank you very much. I don't consider myself having a brilliant mind, but
it's very useful.
I don't consider myself a dummy either, you know.
I got you.
What we want is interesting conversations.
Yeah, that's all we need.
All right.
Would you think what he's talking about is a kind of intuition?
We got about a minute.
Okay.
Let's say farewell. I'm going to push the button and let you go listen to your television again.
Thank you again.
Thanks again.
All righty. Well, we've had a lot of great conversations here, Joe. Do you have the show penultimate or the ultimate closing notes here? Or are we going to have to wing it?
No, I think we do have it right here somewhere closing.
All right, it's time to start wrapping things up. If you would like to contact us before our next show, get out your pen and paper and write down our contact information. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Faithless Forrest.
Yeah, please give us some feedback next time. Thank you.
All right, you can send you can do a voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
And we are also 5 o'clock every Tuesday. Be here with us Eastern Time.
We want to thank all of the viewers and our callers and the staff at CTV KNOX and Sam, who has been running the technical equipment. See you again next week. Whoever is going to